What's up, guys? I'm so excited for this interview because the guest that we're bringing onto the show today is going to share his story with you and show you that even when the playing days are over, if it doesn't end how it was expected to end, it's not the end because it's actually just the beginning. He's going to share his story with you about how concussions played a major role in his playing career, but how he took advantage of the opportunities given to him after that to now be a coach and get behind the camera for the Idaho Horsemen. So, you don't want to miss this interview. It's going to be a really, really insightful one. And he's given a lot of advice to athletes and the parents of athletes, student athletes, so that you understand the importance of going to school and taking care of yourself. Check this out. This is the Game Time Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time! Woo!
This is the Game Time Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens.
What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Game Time Guru podcast. I am your host, Shane Larson. 4.5 years strong. We're going with this show. We've already surpassed 200 episodes. I want to give a special shout out to the listeners out there. 91 different countries we've reached. We're continuing to grow the show. And I want to ask if anybody is listening to this right now and has not left me a review on Apple Podcasts, please do so. It helps the show get out to more people so that people can hear the guests and their stories. And, you know, on this show, the goal is to deliver a panoramic view on sports. And the whole point of that is to bring on guests, share their stories, and get to know the inside scoop, if you will, on things. And today we have a really, really special opportunity to hear from an individual who, you know, competed in sports at a high level and has quite the unique story of, you know, why, you know, they're still contributing to sports in a different way. This way it's behind the camera. Right now it's behind the camera, but before that it wasn't that way. He was on the field. But we're gonna get to hear his story about, you know, what changed and what happened in his life, and how he's still contributing to the game behind the camera as well as coaching. So his name's Stone Belzo, and I met Stone at the Idaho Horsemen games here, helping cover the Horsemen a little bit, and had no idea of this story. And now today he gets to share that with the rest of us and the listeners out there. So hopefully someone can find this inspiring and motivating and find some value out of this. So Stone, first off, thanks so much for joining the show, brother.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm glad.
This is super, super exciting. Yeah, so we're going to rewind the clock. Before, you know, I mentioned with the Horsemen. Your brother plays for the Horsemen. He's quite a stud himself. His name's Hunter, and he's out there. I finally got to see him play. Like, he hadn't been playing for the first couple of weeks of the season due to an injury, but he finally got out there and started playing. Absolute stud. And then it's just a weird connection how social media works, because I guess it was your dad who had followed me on Twitter because I was following the Horsemen. So he was just getting kind of some updates on the Horsemen, and then I got to know you a little bit more, and it just was a weird connection how that all worked. And then they were like, you got to get Stone on the show. So we're going to rewind the clock, Stone, a little bit and talk to you about your athletic upbringing, you know, where you're from. Tell us where you're from and what sports you played and how long you've been competing in sports. Was it from a young age that you always played football or any other sport, or was it just, when did you start?
Yeah, so I'm from Middletown, Connecticut. I started playing football when I was 4 years old, actually. You're not supposed to do contact football at 4 years old, obviously, but I remember I would just show up to my brother's practices. I would be practicing with them, full pads on equipment. So I started playing football at 4 years old. And I also played baseball for a while, too. Baseball is actually my first love. And then I just decided to play football when I got to high school full on. So I played those two when I was younger.
You started at a really young age then. Yeah, so...
Yeah.
Even here in Idaho, most of us who play football, I mean, I played my whole life as well, like going up through the high school ranks. I mean, I didn't start till I was 7, though, and that was flag. Like, it's a little different game. Now, being from back east, did you guys have, like, the only one that, like, really is a well-known, like, big-time name out of Connecticut is Steve Young. Steve Young's a big name out there. Is that someone that you guys look up to from being back there at all, or was that not really something that you guys heard about? Because that's somebody I know of that's from Connecticut, but I don't really know a lot of big names that are from there.
Well, it's funny. Honestly, a lot of people don't know he's from Connecticut, and it's kind of interesting. But I would say for our hometown, the biggest name that we have is Andre Drummond. from my home, so a lot of guys can represent that and like get that out there. But when it comes to like really like high profile guys, I'll be honest with you, there's not really that many guys from Connecticut that are like that. I would just say like Steve Young, Andre Drummond, and then there's a few other guys too, but they're not really like well known. It's kind of weird.
That is interesting. I didn't realize Drummond as well. So that's cool. I mean, I studied Steve Young quite extensively. I read a book of his. So I remember like reading about how like not a lot of people knew, like no one was paying attention to sports back in Connecticut back then. And he was kind of making his own, name heard back there and doing his thing. And then obviously traveled out to the West Coast, play at BYU and whatnot. But it's just interesting. So coming from Connecticut, you're over there. What are sports like in Connecticut for you? Like, talk to us about what it's like growing up there. We're over here in Idaho, other side of the country. What was it like there? What's the competition like? What's the biggest sport? I mean, is lacrosse a big sport there? Is football a big sport? Is basketball? Like, what's it like in Connecticut for the upbringing for the youth?
So basically, how Connecticut works is obviously we're at a disadvantage because we're a really small state, but well, honestly, we have a lot of talent throughout the state, and I think it gets overshadowed by the fact that we're just such a small state, and we're New York and these type of places are football and basketball. Those are the two biggest things right there. Like that's the decision that people usually make. Baseball is also like somewhat of a big thing, but football and basketball are the biggest things out in Connecticut. We actually had a lot of guys from my graduating class and a few other like the year ahead of me as well. A lot of guys got drafted into the NFL draft this year too. So the exposure is starting to get there. Like Connecticut is just full of talent. It's just about the exposure from just being a small state. But football and basketball are the primary sports out there. So people live
Yes,
and die for.
I dig that though. I'm glad you actually said that. I think that's a very common issue with some of the smaller states. Idaho runs into the same problem. We got a lot of talent out here from the high school perspective, but not a ton of exposure, which is part of the reason I'm doing what I do with my platform. And there's a couple other guys out here that are now trying to really utilize like social media, for example, leveraging social media to try to get exposure for the younger kids out there, because there is super like talented athletes or super talented athletes all across the country in different areas, but they don't get the exposure. And then you never hear about them because they don't get to go to the big schools because they didn't get the exposure, when in reality, they probably could have had they had the exposure and the other opportunities that some of the bigger states do. So, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Also, too, to add off of that, too, the weird thing is about guys from like Connecticut is the majority of them is that if you don't go to high Division 1 level, majority of guys in the East Coast go Division 3 level, and it's kind of weird because there's like really no in between. So it's like you could have a really talented guy with a Division 1 skill who just probably didn't have it in the classroom, and they just go Division 3. And it's like really weird because when I came here out to the West Coast, it's not necessarily like that. And I was just also an adjustment that I noticed from the West East Coast too.
That is interesting, man. Over here, like you see a lot of junior college, especially out of Idaho. There's a lot of junior college routes, basketball, football, whatever. People will go junior college if they don't make it to the big schools. They have a lot of opportunities there, and then they'll try to make it, to the next level. Super interesting. So we get into the, your sports days, going into the high school level. This is where the story gets interesting. You're a baller, right? You're going into the high school level. Talk to us about what positions you played and kind of what was your high school career like? And what were your plans when you were in high school? What was your mindset, Stone, as you were like thinking towards the future and what you were going to do at the next level?
So it was actually interesting. So it started off when I was in 8th grade. It was about 3 or 4 months until I graduated middle school. And the head football coach came up to me and was like, "Are you interested in coming to practice with us and do 7-on-7?" This is varsity football. So me in 8th grade, I'm like, this is damn near the NFL for me almost. So I was a little nervous at first, but I was like, yeah. So it all started off with me just playing safety when I was in 8th grade during 7-on-7. So getting those reps. I was a 4-year starter from freshman to senior year. I played safety from freshman and sophomore year. I played outside linebacker, a little bit of running back my junior year, and then I was quarterback my senior year. It was honestly one of the most funnest times of my life. I just wish ultimately, like the discussion we had a little bit earlier before the show, is basically I just taken school more serious. And I would say, I think looking back on my high school self, that's the number one regret that I had, because if I wish I took advantage of the classroom, then my outcome would be a little bit different. But I would say it was a fun time. Like Middletown High School, where I went to, is known for football. It's known for producing athletes and things like that. And it was just overall just a very great time for me. Then to get more in depth to it about what we were talking about too. So my senior year came around. I was getting looked at by Army, Navy, and Stony Brook. Those are my top 3 schools. Those are who I was really focused on and who I was going to decide from. Then it was about halfway through my senior season. All 3 of those schools came back to me and said academically I was not able to make it in there. So after that happened, it kind of just put me at like a roadblock basically in my career, just kind of just trying to figure out, okay, so now I don't have these options. I don't have a fallback plan. Now what am I going to do? So there was a point in my life in my senior year of high school where I wasn't going to college. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to get into a college. I got blessed that my brother went to Springfield College. He basically just kind of put my name in there for them. They had a discussion with me, and they were able to get me in with a 2.4 GPA, and I was able to just go to Division III, be able to play there with my brother. But to bring that back, of it, my senior year, I got 2 concussions in 1 football game, which really kind of screwed me up. I was saying earlier too how on my second concussion that game, I woke up, my right arm was completely stiff. I had no idea where I was. I didn't even know I was playing a football game, and it was crazy. So I was basically just laid out there. I remember they walked me off to the sideline, and they were just like, "Do you know where you are? Do you know who the president is?" I honestly, I just remember looking at them with a blank stare and didn't know. And then I grabbed my helmet and I run onto the football field. And this is still with 5 minutes left in the football game. And because at this point, I don't know what's going on. I'm just thinking like it hit me after a little bit that, okay, I'm at a football game, and it was just like a subconscious like thing. I grabbed my helmet and I run on the field. And I remember the athletic trainers were out there like grabbing me and all this other stuff. So they took me off the field, and then I went to the doctors. They told me I had just a full-blown concussion and I just had to relax. So I ended up going to Springfield College in my freshman year of college. I ended up 3rd day of practice, full pads, first hit, boom, was knocked out. I honestly don't remember what happened. I remember I was just standing up straight and everything was white, and it was just basically like a bomb went off in my head. So at that point in my life right there, when I was told I couldn't play that season, I had the mindset of saying, without football, there's nothing. So what I did was I failed 4 out of my 5 classes my freshman year. And it was just a very difficult time in my life because I was saying to myself, if I'm not playing football, why am I at school? And I wasn't seeing the bigger picture of things. So after going into my sophomore year, got re-healthy again. I was back lifting, back working out, all this other sort of stuff. I come back, I get another concussion. This is the 3rd day of practice again, same sort of situation. So at this point, I'm told that I can't play football anymore. All this other sort of stuff. So now I'm at the deepest point of my life. Now this gets me into the point of where concussions can play a huge factor in someone's life, right? So ever since I had concussions, the one thing that I noticed was my mental health was not where it once used to be. I was a little bit more down on myself. I looked at things more negatively, all this other sort of stuff. I would have headaches on a consistent basis. I even passed out twice from having concussions. It's just a lot. And going through that time, like it really made me kind of figure out who I was as a person dealing with these concussions. Because the biggest thing that I noticed about myself is that you have to make the decision in life, no matter what it is. At some point in your life, you have to make the decision. Am I going to become this person or am I going to become that person? Right. So it's basically just weighing out the pros and cons. I remember sitting in my room. I'm like, if I don't go to school, if I quit school now, what am I going to be when I go back home? Am I going to be a guy who's going to be working a 9 to 5 for the rest of my life and not enjoying myself and being in this hole with this dark cloud over me with regret? Or am I going to be someone who's going to persevere through this type of thing, find the positive outcome out of this and be able to do something with this opportunity, right? So I basically looked at my concussions as basically a blessing in disguise. I was destined to do coaching, video, all these sort of things. It's just that these concussions made it happen faster.
Right.
And that's basically the way I looked at it. So that's basically, so when it comes to like concussions and stuff like that, when people deal with that, I always take that seriously because I know exactly where someone's coming from. I know the dark place that you can enter when you're battling with concussions. I know what it can do to you mentally. It can make you become a totally different person. And honestly, like me telling this story, like I have a lot of other interesting things to get into, but if I had to say the number one thing that I want someone to take away from this conversation between me and you is understanding the importance of mental health and wanting to help somebody and make sure someone's in a good place in it all the time. And I think that's just the number one focus that I want to get out there. And that's something I want to speak about too. So
Yeah, this is crazy. There are a couple things to unbox here from your story, Stone.
yeah.
The whole, like, even the explanation of what happened in your high school game where you said you like didn't even know where you're at. I remember a friend of mine who played linebacker getting a concussion. He was explaining to me what happened when he did. It was very similar. I mean, I remember him just saying, he got popped when he was making a tackle, just helmet to helmet collision, and then he gets back in the huddle. It was kind of routine oriented. He just got back in the huddle, and the other guy on the team was calling the play out for them on defense, and he said, I remember what he said, and we broke from it. We get back into our defensive set, and he goes, I had absolutely no idea where to go. They're like, where are you going, man? And he's like, what do I do? And he didn't even realize what he was doing, and it was just super crazy, which is scary. I bring that up because what you're saying is congruent with what he told me, and that was over 10, 15 years ago that he told me that story when it first happened. And now hearing you say it, I'm like, oh, wow. Like, so that does seem like a very congruent story to what happens when you get a concussion. The mental health aspect is such an important piece of it. I would like to dive into a little bit more as well, because it's you're messing with your brain. But with football, on this show, I've actually spoken with Andrew Golden from Athlete Intelligence. They have a monitoring device on helmets now that they're using for head impact to try to figure out what can be done to help limit, I guess, these things. And my question for you, Stone, is this, though. As a football player, as a competitor, we understand that is part of the game. As a former football player myself and a boxer, like I understand that that's part of the risk I take. However, a lot of the times these guys, they put their ego up there, or they're so competitive that they go back into games and they continue to play, and maybe they further their risk of injury. My question for you is, looking back, hindsight, would you have continued to play, knowing what you know now about concussions and having experienced things on, multiple times? Do you regret going back and playing for so many years, or do you think that was part of that it would be okay had you not gotten concussions after that first or second one?
That's honestly a great question. I would have to say, honestly, I don't regret it. The reason why I don't regret it is my love for this football game is so strong that if that's how I go out, then that's how I go out. It's just the whole point of I had the opportunity to be able to play this game at a high level and at a successful level, that I guess at this point in my life, I'm okay with that. Previously, I wasn't, but I honestly don't have any regrets. I think I would go back and do the same thing. Now, when it comes to somebody who, let's say, for example, when I have a kid down the road, if he says to me he just doesn't want to play football just based off of the risk of head injuries, I would completely understand that. I'm not going to be that guy who's going to be like, well, no, this, and that. No, I can understand that, because dealing with this is very, very hard. So I have no regrets, but when it comes to me giving advice to someone, I'm all open to playing and not playing. So
I dig that. You see, your eyes have been opened, it seems like, so you're very open-minded when it comes to it. So you're understanding. That's awesome to hear. Now, the mental health aspect of it, we're going to get into what you're kind of doing now. I mean, you even mentioned there's like a positive light to all of this. A blessing in disguise is the words that you use. I'm a firm believer that there's a man upstairs playing chess in our lives, chess, not checkers. He's putting things in place for us the way that he wants to see it. That's my personal beliefs. And so it kind of sounds like that's sort of what, a blessing in disguise. These things kind of help speed up the process to get you into coaching, and then obviously some videography that we can talk about here in just a little bit. But the mental health side of things, there are a lot of reports and studies out there showing, concussions can play a big, big role in depression, anxiety, and a lot of other things. I'm curious, man, like if there's somebody out there, Stone, that's dealing with this. I know there's tons and tons of them that are battling. Maybe they don't realize why they start to feel such anxiety when they weren't anxiety-driven people before. Maybe they're starting to feel down on themselves and they don't realize what it is before, but maybe they're sitting here listening and like, well, I've had a couple of concussions. Maybe there's some congruency, some parallels there. How did you get through those deepest, darkest parts of your life? Because you mentioned like school, you're done with football. Up until that point in your life, football was literally everything for you. So you didn't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. You didn't know where to go at that particular point. and you were battling with some depression and some anxiety. How did you get through it, and what would you advise for other people that might be struggling with the same thing?
So, okay. So first off, basically, when I was going through a lot of this, there would be points in time where I wouldn't leave my room for days on end. I would stay in my room. I would just lock the door. I don't want to speak to anybody. I don't want to be around anybody, all this other sort of stuff. But I would say the biggest thing for me personally is find someone who you trust or find somebody who you don't know. And what I mean by find someone who you don't know, that can be a mental health worker or that could be somebody else. Because a lot of times when you vent out your feelings to somebody, it takes a weight off of your shoulder. And that's what I noticed. Because prior to this, I was one of those guys who was very private. You ask me what's wrong, I won't give you an answer. And then one day someone just said to me, just basically just get your feelings out there to somebody and just see how you feel after. I had a discussion with one of my best friends and just basically about everything that has been going on in my life, how I feel, all this and that. And when I was done, it was basically like 100-pound weight was lifted off my chest. And I would do that on a consistent basis. And that's why I said, find someone who you trust or find someone who you kind of, who knows you. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's someone like a mental health worker, basically. They don't know you, but it's basically like an outsider's perspective on what you're going through. And I think that is the best thing to do is find someone to talk to, get your feelings out there. And I'll tell you what, it made the biggest difference in the world for me. And also too, on top of that is forcing yourself to do good habits. So for example, like I would wake up and not go to class for 3 weeks straight. I wouldn't go. I didn't even know what was going on in class. And then there came a point in my time where no matter how bad I didn't want to do something, no matter how much my mind was telling me, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, force yourself to do it. Because the minute you do that, it automatically puts you in like a way of having good habit. And that's what I also did too, is basically just forcing myself to do good. So those two things right there, communication and forcing yourself to do things, is probably the biggest advice I could give to somebody.
I dig that, man. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. And I think the listeners here are going to love that as well. And I hope if you're listening to this show right now, maybe you're a parent. A lot of athletes are listening too, but if you're a parent of an athlete, maybe use this as an opportunity to kind of like maybe analyze what maybe your kid's going through potentially right now. If you have a child that's in high school or not even there yet, but just someone who might be, you're seeing signs of this, listen to what Stone's telling you guys right now and kind of maybe utilize this as an opportunity to take advantage of that and maybe, help the situation. One thing I also wanted to talk about, Stone, is I wanted to unbox this piece. You talked about when you were in high school, the importance of going to class. We've talked to a lot of coaches. We've talked to a lot of athletes, like even the professional athletes that I've had on the show, like Jerry Stackhouse, who used to play in the NBA, Walter Bond, a lot of these guys, Randy Livingston in the NBA, all of them. One of the things they've stressed a lot in the conversation, and you kind of talked about it, were grades. And I don't think a lot of high school athletes understand that concept. They think that they can just, oh, well, I'm going to be playing sports, so I don't really need to go there. And then you have people like Cardale Jones, who played for Ohio State at one point, and he's a quarterback, and he said, we don't go to college to play school. And he wasn't a big advocate of, school, so he just went there to play football. And so I think a lot of athletes in high school kind of get that same mentality. They're like, oh, I'm good enough to go play sports. I'm going to get a full ride scholarship to go play sports. And when I'm there, I'm just going to make it to the league anyways. I don't need to go to class. So I think the answer is easy of like, yeah, go to class and do your work. But is there anything else you would maybe tell, like for these kids that are, they're athletes, but they're hearing your story. It did affect you because the schools you wanted to go to, like Army, Navy, they didn't let you in because of that. What advice would you give besides just saying go to class? Maybe something more in depth on the importance of doing your schoolwork while you're in high school on top of being an athlete.
Okay, so I would say the biggest thing that I've figured out when it comes to academics and things like that is, again, basically it goes back to a similar thing with mental health. It's always finding some sort of support system, right? When I got to college, my freshman year, I forgot to mention this earlier. I was kicked off the football team for 2 months because of my grades. I had a 1.8 GPA my freshman year. I ended up meeting with this lady. She worked at the Academic Success Center. Her name was Haley Walker. Basically, what she did to me was she was like, you're going to meet with me every single day for 3 days, and we're going to do nothing but homework. We're going to go over your assignments together. She's like, I'm going to give you no choice but to sit with me and do your schoolwork. Right. And I think, and that was the biggest change for me. So when you talk about kids taking school more seriously and things like that, I think a support system is huge. And I think what our school systems lack a lot of times is a positive influence in the classroom. For me personally, my experience was not that great when it came in the classroom. It was basically teachers told me that I didn't have to do it or they didn't care if I did it. And I didn't have that person pushing me to do something and force me to do something. And I think that's what's big when it comes to classroom. So I would say a support system would be the best thing to be able to like focus on your school and have someone hold you accountable, because accountability is the best thing when you want to achieve something. So having somebody hold you accountable, and also too, it's just having positive influence in the classroom, someone who's gonna be there for the better of the student instead of just being there to be there. And I think those are two of the biggest things right there that help a student focus on school.
I dig that. And I think anybody who's listening can relate. You got
Hmm.
teachers that truly care about their students. You got teachers that are collecting a paycheck. There's a difference.
Yes.
And I think what you just said right there is super important, especially when you're in your developmental stages of your life, like
Hmm.
middle school, high school ages. Like that's where you build the foundations, the habits, the routines that you need later
Hmm.
when you get out of that. Even outside of education, it's yeah, that's what you need, and that's when you build it. I love that advice, and
Hmm.
super important. Accountability is indeed huge. Now, before we move forward to the next part of your football journey, which is kind of like, we'll dive a little bit more into coaching and then what you're doing now at the Horsemen. But
Hmm.
I want to know your thoughts on the CTE discussion. A lot of athletes in the NFL are speaking up. There's a lot more coming out, a lot more awareness, I should say, in the last maybe 5 to 10 years because of the lingering effects of multiple concussions and so forth. Is there anything, in your opinion, Stone, that can be done or should be done um, in regards to helping this? Like, I don't know if you can necessarily eliminate these concussions and the risks that you
Hmm.
take. I don't know, and I'm curious for someone who's been in that, who's had the experience of concussions at multiple times that ultimately ended your playing career. What do you think? Is there anything that you think can be done to help this situation?
So where the concussion issue is now in football, there's a lot of good things to it. There's a lot of bad things to it. Like, for example, I think the way that they've been teaching people to tackle nowadays has been huge, keeping your head out of it. I think those sort of things make a difference. I think, too, with the protocols, if I get hit hard, I whack the back of my head off the turf, they're going to immediately take me out. Right. I think those are all great things, but I think there's still a lot of gray areas when it comes to this sort of thing. Like, for example, no joke, I probably took 50 impact tests in my whole entire life. I've passed impact tests with full blown concussions. Like, I'm talking like I knew I still couldn't play, but I was passing the tests that they were giving me and I was getting approved to play. So, me in my competitive mindset, I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to play the way I feel right now, and so be it. So I think they're doing a lot of good things. I just think there needs to be a lot of change. And also, too, when it comes to brain injuries, it's very hard to gauge and to get a gauge on like how severe someone really is. Because at the end of the day, you don't know how damaged someone is mentally or in their brain until you get a deeper look, and that's inside the brain. And I think it just makes it so hard to kind of like battle and like try to like stop this sort of thing, because at the end of the day you really don't have that much control over it, right? It's a game of football. Like, you're going to get your head smashed at least 50 times a game if you play every down. And I just think that the treatment aspect of it needs a lot of improvement. I don't know what that needs, but it's just not there yet. um like, the treatment that I got for concussions is basically just when you're not at practice, go in a dark room and lay there all day. What's that going to end up causing? That's going to end up causing someone to be depressed, anxiety, and those sort of things. So I think it's little treatment stuff and things like that need to be improved. I wish I can give like basically better ideas on how that can be. It's just that the brain is so complex that a treatment for it is just, at this point, I would say unrealistic unless there's a deeper look into it. And that's just the whole gray area behind it.
No, it's super insightful though, and it's intriguing because that is I think that's why we're seeing so many complications. So many people are like, "Well, why can't they just come up with a fix for it?" Well, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of like, humans themselves. They have to be honest. There's a lot of like self-reporting that needs to be done. Like somebody like yourself, you said you're a competitor. There's a lot of things that you might not feel great, but you're going to say you are, and you have to take your word for it. Sometimes there's money that's involved, especially at the professional level. I mean, there's a lot, but I do like the idea. What you just said there was super interesting and in treatment. There's a lot of things that need to be done. And when I spoke with David Irving when he was with the Dallas Cowboys, he was a defensive lineman, and David was telling me, every single play that he's out there on the field during an NFL game, it's like a collision. It's like a car wreck. He's like, I have broken fingers, but especially my head. He goes, I've got migraine headaches for 3 days afterwards. I'm still trying to figure that out. He goes, guaranteed concussions, but sometimes at the professional level, they don't even test you because they don't want it. They're scared of the results they're going to get, and it's a money game, so they need to have their star players out there. And so there's a lot of things that need to be done. People need to be held accountable, and it starts from the top down. I think the treatment's a huge piece. So I appreciate you saying that. But when we see your situation, your playing days were kind of ended with the concussions and whatnot, and you did mention it opened up an opportunity to start coaching and everything like that. So I want to hear from Stone, the coach, now, how the game looks to you as a coach as compared to when you were a player. Like how does the game look to you now, and what are some of the things you've implemented into your coaching career and some of the things you've learned?
I would say the biggest difference between coaching and playing, well, there's a lot of big differences. I'll tell you, so like with football, when you're playing football, it's like really hard to describe. I would just say like the biggest thing between coaching and, and playing is that you look at the game in a different view. When you're a coach, you get it more of like an analytic, statistical view behind it, and basically just trying to find tendencies, weaknesses, things like that. And when it comes to like being a player, it's just like, I don't know how, when I played football, I'm a very prideful person, and I would take things personal on the football field, right? So when I came out there on the football field, I would always think that person who I was lined up against did something to me wrong. It basically it was weird. It was a weird way of looking at it. Like I was really aggressive. And now when I'm coaching, I feel like a lot more laid back. I'm relaxed. I'm seeing things through a whole picture. I'm not focusing on one matchup between me and one other guy. I'm focusing on a matchup between 22 other guys. And it's just like the whole analytic and statistical view on it as being a coach was something that I never had as a player. As a player, it was just that I'm going to line up across you. I'm better than you, and I'm going to smash you in your mouth. So now it's a lot more different. It's more like laid back in a sense of the best way I could describe it. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe the difference, but it's a lot more laid back than it is obviously playing. So
if you could go back in time as a player, now knowing what it's like to coach other players, for me, coaching basketball, for example, at the 16-year-old level, so they're, high school level kids, what I've noticed is my patience has been tested. And I would have changed a lot of things that I used to do in practices, for example, when my coaches were talking. So like, there's a couple things that I go back and forth. I'm like, man, hindsight's always 20/20. I wish I would have had this perspective as a coach back then, because now I know why my coach wanted to punch me in the mouth. And now I know why my coach made us run suicides when we wouldn't shut our ass when we're talking in practice and he's talking. So I'm just wondering, like,
that's also a great.
Yeah, I want to know if there's anything you would say to yourself as a player now, like now that you see it from a coach's perspective.
It's funny because I remember as a player, whenever we'd get punished or have to just like run sprints. So for example, how our school worked was if one guy got in trouble, the whole entire team got in trouble, right? And that's how it was in high school. And I never could figure out that concept. I did, but I didn't at the same time. But basically, like when I became a coach and I looked at it from an outside perspective, it's basically that you have 50 other guys besides this one guy who could hold this one guy accountable and make sure he's making the right decisions and make sure he's doing that. Me as a player, I didn't realize that. You know what I mean? It was basically like, oh, this one guy is screwing up, let him screw up. But in reality, from a coach's perspective, you want your other players to say, let's hold this guy accountable. Let's pick him up. Let's make sure he makes the right decisions. So when I became a coach, and I noticed that like it's a whole team. You can't just punish one individual. If one individual messes up, that means everybody else allowed him to mess up. So now it's everybody's fault. And I didn't look at it that way before, and I look at it that way now. And that's like one small thing that's like really interesting to me as well.
Totally. I hope all the athletes listening to this right now take note. Take a note right now. Take your pen out and write that down so you can hear from those who've been there. I know it always sounds like, oh, my parents always told us this, this, and this, and this, but like for real, as athletes and former athletes speaking to athletes right now, please like take note of this because it's super important to have this perspective. It's better to have it earlier than later. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, Stone, talking about where you're at now. Like I said earlier in the show, like I met you with the Idaho Horsemen. You're taking, footage of them with the camera. You're chilling here at this professional indoor football league. It's a smaller football league, smaller football team, but it's actually still really fun to be around, and you're a part of it with the camera. So let's talk about that. Now you're contributing to football, not only as a coach, but now you're able to be alongside your brother with the team that he's on this side of the country in Idaho, taking footage of the game. And talk to us about like how you see the game now, doing it, with the camera.
All right. Well, it's funny because from filming the game, like from just a cameraman's point of view, no X's and O's involved. Let me tell you something. Arena football is crazy. Like, just think about this. You're gonna take a football field and let's just cut it in half and let's put a wall around it. Like that's insane, just off the right there. And it's just like I would say, like me filming the physicality. I think it's more physical of a game than it is 11-on-11 football. It's just because it's so compact. Everybody's on top of each other. So there's a few times where I'm sitting back and I'm just like, damn, like this. I'll see a wall break. We were playing Oregon 2 weeks ago, and Justin Clarkson caught a pass in the end zone. He gets hit. The wall broke in half. We had to stop the game for 20 minutes to put it back together. So it's like me from a cameraman's perspective and filming this sort of stuff. It's absolutely insane. And I love arena football. I think it's one of the greatest things that I've seen with my own two eyes in a while. So from a cameraman's view, I love it. But so I'm going to tell you a funny story. So one day I was walking to practice and someone said, "Oh, the cameraman's here," right? And in the back of my mind, I said to myself, I said, the cameraman. Because I don't vision myself. I don't look at myself as a cameraman. I look at myself as like a coach. So I'm like, I just got called a cameraman, right? So I said, from there on out, I'm going to try to get myself a role X's and O's wise, right? So basically what my job was before the football season started was I would film every play from practice from above, and then I just post it on a huddle. So I said, what's one way that I can show that I know football while filming at the same time? So what I did is I learned their offense, I learned their defense, and what I would do is every time I'd post film, I'd label formation, I would label routes, I would label coverage, and I would do all this other stuff, right? And I remember a couple days after, Coach Reynolds comes up to me, he's like, "How do you know all this stuff?" And I was like, "I just pay attention," right? So then when the football season started, what I started to do is I started to put tendency charts together. I started to put percentages together. Basically, just every team that we were playing, their tendencies, how much they run the football, how much they pass the football, what formations. Do they line up on the left side of the field? Do they throw to the left side of the field more? Do they throw to the right side of the field more? All these little things. So I started to put that together for our coaching staff and this and that. And long story short is that a lot of people don't know this, but behind the scenes, I have a pretty big role now when it comes to X's and O's with just schematics, scheme, and all this other thing. So I think it's pretty interesting because people see me on game day with just a camera in my hand, but it's Monday through Friday. I'm X's and O's full on. That's my focus up till 3:00 in the morning, breaking down film and doing all this other sort of stuff too. So it's been a great time out here. It's been I love it. So
That is dope, dude. I love that story too. Cause now the people who've come to the Horseman games, anybody who follows this league for that matter, now you get to know like Stone's not just the guy with the camera, which by the way, there's so many people, including myself. I'm like, are you not nervous when you're like standing right there? Cause like even in this game, you're standing like right behind the line, like you're on the field, kind of like the coaches are. I'm like, dude, if there's a turnover coming right at you, like how do you get out of the way? But luckily I don't think that's happened to you yet, but people just look at you like, well, I guess he's just the camera guy, but now they know the inside scoop of what you're doing behind the scenes. Yeah, sure, you get the footage on game day, which is awesome, like as far as like being out there and doing your thing, but you have a vital piece in the entire system. You mentioned Idaho, you mentioned being out here. What are your thoughts of Idaho? We got to get this information from people. You're on the other side of the country. What are your thoughts about Idaho? And be completely honest with us.
All right, so before I came out here, what I was expecting is just dirt roads. Maybe I might see a horse and buggy down the road from time to time, something like that. That's just what East Coast people expected Idaho to be, right? And then I get here, and I fell in love with this place. I love it out here. Like Meridian's a beautiful area. I love going down to the village, all this other stuff. I did not expect any of them, like Idaho, to have any of this stuff. But I'll tell you what's beautiful out here. I love it out here. Like even this view that I'm looking at on this back porch right here is just amazing. So it's a lot different than what I'm accustomed to. It's a lot more laid back. Let me tell you something. People who live on the East Coast have to take a deep breath because people walk around angry, on the go, hustle bustle 24/7. And then I come out here and it's like people actually say hi to you when you're walking down the street. Like that's not something I'm even used to. So it's just like little things like that. So I mean, I love it out here. Laid back, relaxed. It's not aggressive. It's a great time out here.
Dude, that's so dope to hear, man. It's funny you said that because like my wife makes fun of me when I'm running around the neighborhood. I'll do my runs and stuff, and I wave to everybody, and she calls me the neighborhood wave guy because I like say hi to everybody. I'm just like, I don't know, that's how I've always been. She's not from Idaho either; she's from Washington. But it's just funny you mentioned that because I'm like, I don't know, I've just always said hi to people every time they walk by. I don't know, this is kind of how I've always been. But so that's good to hear. And plus, you mentioned the village. Shout out the village. That's where my wife and I always love to go as the family. Like just walk around the village and just chill. Like I don't even have to buy anything. Just walk around the village because it's kind of pretty outside and just hang out. That's cool to hear.
Go sit by the waterfall.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Go chill by the waterfall and just relax, sit back and hang out with your homies and whatnot. It's always good, dude. I like hearing the outside perspective. So Stone, I want to know now, like, obviously right now you're covering the Horsemen and hopefully this season continues to go well for them. I'm enjoying covering the Horsemen from my angle, at least, just kind of being around them. It's kind of fun. I love watching guys compete. I don't care what level of football it is. I think it's cool when guys get out there and play the game they love. I mean, I'm 32 now and I still compete in basketball and whatnot, but like I miss some of the football days. I miss the boxing days. I miss that competition. So it's cool for me to watch it, but I want to know from your perspective, what are you going to do? Like, what should we expect to see from Stone Belzo moving forward with your coaching career and maybe even videography and whatnot? Like, what are you taking from your experience here with the Horsemen and what should we expect to see you doing in the near future?
All right, so finish up my senior year of college coming up next semester. After that's done, then I have my two graduate assistant years, so GA years. So I'll go to grad school for 2 years, basically just get more coaching experience underneath my belt. Once those 2 years are over, I'm just going to put my whole resume together, send it out to literally every high Division I program in the country, NFL in the country. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to send my resume everywhere and just try to just get a job at the highest level I could possibly get to, and just always have the mindset of never being satisfied. Like my ultimate goal is, like I was talking to my head coaches, I want to be a head football coach at a high Division I program, or I want to be some sort of coordinator, positional coach at the NFL level, right? And basically how I have to get there is I have to put my dues in, right? And I have to do what everybody else has done. I have to do the work as a GA of carrying the ball bags to practice every day, or having to roll the jugs machine out and doing all the other little things. But I always have to remember at the end of the day that those little things that I do are going to eventually pay off at the end. So basically, if you want me to put it down on paper, in about 10 to 12 years right now, I will be a coordinator or a head coach at a high Division I program, or hopefully in the NFL within 10 to 12 years, and living out my dream. And that's where I see myself going. So, yeah.
I don't doubt that at all, man. I think that's going to be super sick. And we look forward to seeing, where you go with all this, because you're already putting in the work right now that's necessary. If you had any parting words to wrap up the interview, one piece of advice of like what sports have taught you in your life from any capacity, whether it be a player or a coach, what's the biggest thing that sports have taught you in your life? Because I always share with people, Stone, that sports and life, there's some parallels. Athletes aren't just a bunch of dumb jocks. There are a lot of good skill sets you can learn from competing that you can take into your regular life. So from your perspective, since you've got a lot of different perspectives in sports now from a different viewpoint, what is the biggest thing that sports have taught you for your regular life?
I would say the biggest thing that sports taught me is honestly just my work ethic. I always knew when I played sports, if I didn't do my job in practice, if I didn't make the proper read, if I didn't make this tackle, it was always in the back of my mind that I was going to get benched. I wasn't going to play. So again, that's the same thing in life. Whenever you're doing something, right? Let's say for example, I'm in school. Without school, you can't have life. And that's basically the same thing. School is basically football practice, right? It's basically you're in there, you're doing like that extra work that needs to be done and be successful, all that little thing. You want to look at it as a gift rather than something that's hard. But what I mean by that is like when I'm practicing football, right? I'm learning a new scheme. I'm learning a new play. I'm doing something to better myself. And that's how you have to look at it. And it's the same thing with you in a job or you just in school or anything like that. Like you're doing something for a reason. Find the positive out of it and work hard. And that's all I'd have to say too is like when it comes to life and sports, the number one thing is your work ethic. If you don't put the work in, you will not be successful and you will fail. And that's how life is. And as harsh as it sounds, it's the reality of it. People who are lazy and people who are sit back and people who wait for things to happen to them are the people who don't succeed. It's the people who go out and take advantage of the opportunity that they have is the ones who succeed in life. And if I had to give one piece of advice, I'd say that's what that is.
Heck yeah, man. Words of the wise. Ladies and gentlemen, Stone Belzo. He's not just the cameraman. He knows the X's and O's. He's the coach, the former player. He's got it down. And I just want to say thanks once again, Stone, for joining us and sharing your story here on the podcast. I hope everybody who has listened has learned something. Make sure you're subscribed to the show and leave us a review so that we can get this story out to more people. But once again, Stone, appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a great time.
Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.